Hello, friends. Welcome to another episode of the Blazor Power Hour. This week, we're going to tackle something that I get asked quite a lot. And this is a question that comes around from the fact that Maui is finally shipped. And with Maui shipping, we have Blazor hybrid applications that we can build. Now, Blazor Hybrid lets us build applications that use the Blazor framework inside of a desktop host and a mobile host. So we can do desktop development for Windows and Mac, and we can do mobile development for Android and iOS from .NET from a Blazor framework application using Blazor Hybrid. Now, it's a really cool setup to be able to do this, but the question I keep getting is how do I include my web application, or how do I take my web application and move it to Blazor Hybrid? So I'll show you how to do both of those. It's actually the same exact process to get that to work, which gives us web, desktop, and mobile all from one single code base. Now, it's going to be multiple projects in a single solution, but we're going to share a lot of code between our web and our desktop applications. And hello to friends. Welcome back to the show. Nice to see you there, Smab UK. So I'm immediately going to just jump straight into Visual Studio for this. And we're going to create a brand new project from scratch. And I will show you how to do this step by step, and then we'll talk about how you can transition your existing app into a Blazor hybrid app as we go. So the first thing I want to do is create a brand new project. To make things easy, I'm going to start with a blank solution. And we'll call this Blazor Power. So this is going to be my Blazor Power solution. It's an empty solution. There is nothing in here project-wise yet. So there's no Blazor app, no nothing. It's just an organizational piece here with our solution. Next thing I want to do is add a brand new project. And this is going to be a Blazor WebAssembly application. So we'll grab our Blazor WebAssembly app. And we'll go ahead and add that to the project. And then we'll call this Blazor Power Web. And this is going to include a web server, a web client, and a shared library. Maybe I don't want to put web on there. Let's call this my Blazor app. So we'll just call it my Blazor app. We'll throw it in the solution. And then I'm going to choose ASP.NET Core hosted just so we get a web server as well. So we get the best of all worlds. So we're going to have quite a few projects in the solution. So I've got a client application, a server application, and a shared application. So the client is obviously the web client. This is our WebAssembly app. If you've already built a web application using Blazor WebAssembly, this is where you're probably starting out. This is your application you already have built. You may or may not have a server, but the server in this instance is there to serve up any static resources that we have, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, that sort of thing. It's not going to be rendering pages for us, though. That's what the Blazor framework does. The payload gets pushed down by the server. The Blazor framework on the client renders the application. So at no time are we rendering server-side HTML and sending that down to the client, unless we want to enable like server-side pre-rendering or something like that. But just so you know, when we start transitioning over to a Blazor hybrid application, that the server is not serving web pages per se. It is mostly there just for data. It's going to be serving API data, JSON data across the wire, that sort of thing. Our shared data is just things that are common on all fronts here. So any kind of class objects, shared logic, that sort of thing that can run on our client or our server or in the shared library. In the case of the sample, that we have here, we have a weather forecast object, and this is just a plain old class object. This is just a weather forecast class. It doesn't really have any sort of intelligence to it other than this simple conversion of Fahrenheit to Celsius or Celsius to Fahrenheit. So this is where any kind of shared logic would go, though, if we have multiple models that we use across the client and server, and potentially a hybrid application. That's where that data or that code would go. So we have our Blazor app. Let's go ahead and give it a run and make sure that it is fully working. All right, so we've got our Blazor application here. We're up and running and good. We're good to go. We have everything that we need. This is the standard out of the box Hello World application. And, it's pretty responsive here. We've got our counter component and our fetch data. It's nice to know that this is responsive because we're going to be building mobile as well from the same code base. So you want to make sure that your views work on mobile too. All right. So give me 1 second here. All right. The next thing I want to do is add a Blazor, Blazor Hybrid Maui application. So I'm going to go over and do new project again. And this time I'm going to choose .NET Maui Blazor app. If you don't have this template, then you need to install the latest Visual Studio Preview. And when you're installing Visual Studio Preview, or if you already have it installed, you may need to update it. Make sure you check the box for cross-platform Maui applications, and you should get the Blazor app template. I know there is a bug right now that if you have the ASP.NET and .NET 7 previews installed, then it will have a conflict with the new templates and they will not show up or run properly. So you may need to uninstall .NET 7 preview as well. Just keep that in mind. So I'm going to call this one My Maui App. There is a bit of a name collision if you just call it Maui App. There is already a class of Maui App, and you're going to hit some issues there. So just kind of name the app appropriately. For demo purposes, this gets to be a little bit of an issue, probably not so much in production. We'll go ahead and name this and choose our .NET framework and hit create. So now we've got an additional Maui app in our project that is in no way tied to these other projects in the application yet. So I can run it independently. I'm just going to go over here on the side and say I want to start a new instance. I'll go ahead and choose without debugging just to hopefully make things a little bit faster. I just want to kind of check here and make sure that the app actually runs after it compiles. And you'll notice it's going through several builds here. It's checking to see if it can build for Mac Catalyst and iOS, Android, and so on. I don't have the Mac connected at the moment, so I can't do Mac or iOS builds. We might be able to get an Android app running, but we definitely want to see that run on the Windows desktop. So we'll let this go. And we should get a deployment here on our Windows desktop. So right now it does look exactly the same, but that's just because we started from the same template. You can see here, it does say My Maui app up at the top. So it is in fact pulling the code from the Maui application. We haven't shared any of our code base yet. This is all separate and duplicate sets of UI components and implementations across web and desktop. So if we look, we have some similarities here. Let's see, do I have my zoom tool in? I don't have my zoom tool on. Let me get that up and running. Let's get Zoom it going so we can do some annotations here. All right, so we have our WebAssembly app, and we have our Maui app, which is our Windows desktop, etc. They both have a pages and shared folder. Here's pages, here's shared. They are 99% the same out of the box with the templates. For all intents and purposes, we can say they are identical. There's a little bit of difference on the fetch data solution here for the WebAssembly app versus the Maui app, because I think, yeah, this one uses a weather forecast service. This one uses HTTP client to get the data for those views. So they are somewhat different. Um, the Maui application, since it doesn't have a server project built into it, remember this server isn't doing anything with the Maui app yet. It has this data service here that just generates the same data that the server should be sending our application. Now, realistically, I would assume that most folks are going to have some sort of HTTP request that they want to make to get data into their app. With the addition of Maui, you do get the ability to read and write from the Windows, or sorry, the platform disk, whatever it may be, Android, iOS, Mac, Windows. So you do have access to disk, so you could save, cache databases, do all that stuff. We're going to keep it simple today, and just say that we're going to need an HTTP call here. So we're going to end up reusing the WebAssembly app. We got some questions coming in. So let me take those first. From which would be a starting point to convert a WinForm app to a Blazor app or web app? Is this feasible? So that's actually a really good question. What you could do in that scenario, if you have a WinForms app that you want to convert to something more modern, one of the places to start is you can actually bring in a WebView 2 component to a WinForms app. If you're able to get that WinForms app updated to .NET 6, then you can use the web, the, let me find the right documentation here. WinForms Blazor Hybrid. You can start making a Blazor Hybrid app from Windows Forms. So I'll drop this in chat in just a second here. But essentially, you get the WebView component. That's what I was trying to say. The WebView component, and put that in your .NET 6 Web Forms application. Then you can begin adding Blazor components to that project and slowly convert that project into a Blazor hybrid application. And then once you have it fully into a Blazor hybrid mode, you could take it out of WinForms and migrate it to Maui, and then you can deploy to iOS, Android, and Mac, and Windows. But you already have Windows, but you could add Mac, iOS, and Android if you took it to Maui once you've got it fully transitioned over to Blazor Hybrid. So there's a full tutorial here on how to add make your web forms or WinForms application a Blazor Hybrid app. And I will post this in chat. Some of the workflow is going to be similar to what we're covering today, but that's a really awesome question. Very feasible. If you're able to get your app to .NET 6, I think that's probably the more challenging part for most folks, is getting that WinForms app to .NET 6 if it is not already a .NET 6 application. So great question there from Murray02. Appreciate that. All right, so we've got our client, our server, our shared, and our Blazor app, our hybrid app. So what we've got here is a client application that is going to be our web client. And then we've got our Blazor hybrid app that is going to be desktop and mobile. And then we have our server, and our server is essentially web API JSON. So these two here are client-facing things. We've got a website and a desktop and mobile deployment. Uh, the the web APIs are just serving up JSON data in this instance. And then, of course, all of our shared logic, if there's any, is in here. I'm going to say shared business logic for this shared folder. Okay. Timebender 360, good morning from Canada. Welcome to the show. Thanks for coming and watching. All right, we're going to need one more project in this because we have Blazor code that is in both the Maui app and the web client app, and we want to share that code. And I don't want to dump that in my shared library here. This is going to be shared business logic. I want to add one more thing here, and that's shared UI logic. So let's add a new project again. And this time we're going to choose a Razor class library project. This is where all of our shared UI is going to go. So we'll go ahead and add that. Let's call this one shared UI, and we'll drop that into our project as well. And I know this looks like a lot of stuff here. It's going to make things really organized and easy if you just trust me. All right. So this is going to be our common location for our shared components and pages. So the first thing I want to do is kind of just remove this placeholder cruft. And I want to get that out of there. We could keep the www root folder. I'm going to remake it actually, but it will come back. I'm going to delete all this stuff. What you're seeing here is just the template. And from the template, what we have is essentially like the class1.cs, but there's just a lot more of it. This is all just boilerplate stuff we don't need. So I'm going to just ditch all that. So don't mind all that. Just when you do file new Razor class library, just empty that thing out. You're not going to need any of that. So now that we've got that out of the way, let's take our pages folder and our shared folder, and let's just copy and paste those over into our shared UI project, because we're going to share the pages and we're going to share the shared components here as well. And then we'll go ahead and copy our www root folder over. And what I don't want is this index HTML. I'm going to go ahead and take that guy out because I want to leave it over here in the main client project, because it's going to bootstrap our Blazor app. So we'll just move everything but the index file. Now that I've done that, I don't need these here. Take those out. So those have been moved over. I've moved pages and I've moved shared, so we don't need those. What we're doing is we're just leaving the client WebAssembly application as a bootstrapping shell, and that's about it. It's just going to boot up a WebAssembly app, and then it's going to read our shared UI folder and grab the application code from it. Anything shared UI should be in here, and then anything shared logic will be in here. So we're nice and organized this way. We might need to go into imports .razor and just take out anything that is now missing. Remember, we deleted the shared folder from our client app. So we'll go ahead and take that using statement away, because that's going to cause us some problems. Apparently, I'm still running somewhere. So we want to make sure we close that as well. And that's it. All of the stuff is gone. We actually will check the program CS2 just to make sure there's not any using statements left over in here that'll give us trouble. And it looks like we're good. So what I want to do now is take the shared UI and add a dependency to my WebAssembly app. So we'll go into here and say shared UI. We'll check that box. That'll add a dependency on shared UI. So now what we've done is we've moved pages and shared and www root here, and we've told our client app that we have a dependency that needs to bring that code into the client application. So now that we have that set up, we're going to need to go back over to www.root and fix some things that are going to be broken. So remember, we moved our CSS files. We moved them because our Maui app is also going to use the same styling. And Timebender 360 says, is there a way to automatically update the namespace when we move folders and code from one project to another in Visual Studio 2022? There's not that I'm aware of. However, you'll notice that I didn't move any .cs files. These are all Razor files. Now, Razor files are by convention named by convention. So counter.razor does not have a namespace in it. If you had a namespace directive at the top, you might want to take that into consideration. Or if you have code behind files that have namespaces in them, then you'll have to change those. If they are just standard components that don't have anything specific regarding namespaces, by convention, they are going to get renamed. But that is a great point because that will cause you some issues if you're moving any CS files over. They may adopt a new namespace or they may need to get reassigned a new namespace. Things could get a little tricky there. All right, so we're in our index HTML, and this is now going to hit a 404 if we run it. Our style sheets will be missing. So what we need to do is change this URL a little bit. I'll zoom in so you can see what I'm talking about. We currently have a link to the CSS folder, and there's no more CSS folder. We took it out of www.root. It is not there anymore. It is in shared UI's www.root folder, which is going to resolve to, I know you guessed it. No, you probably didn't, because this doesn't make a whole lot of sense unless you're really deep into Blazor already. You might know that this is going to be content. So www.root in a shared library gets turned into a content folder. So it will be content and then the namespace, which will be, let's see, this is shared UI, but the actual namespace is going to be, this is going to be Blazor Power dot shared UI, I believe. Blazor Power dot shared UI should be the namespace. And this should get us our CSS file. And we want to do that for app CSS as well. This one we want to keep the same. Now, this one's generated by the compiler for the application. This is these isolated CSS files. So if we define isolated CSS in our application, it will get loaded through CSS isolation into this file when compilation happens. What you're going to think at first, and I know I did, is, well, I don't have any pages or components in here, and there's no pages and components to use CSS isolation. Why should I keep a link here for something that I'm not using? That was a bad thought on my part. So I initially had removed this when I tried this the first time. So what's going to happen is when I compile the shared UI project, it will take any pages. We don't have any pages that have it. We have some shared components here that have a CSS isolation in them. It will compile those into a CSS file at runtime, or at build time, I mean. It will put them in the content folder when I added a dependency to my WebAssembly project. The compiler will see that I have a dependency on shared UI. It will then go through the CSS isolation process for my shared UI, or for my WebAssembly application, and inject the the CSS isolation from the www.root here into this file. So this is going to be compiler magic here that that puts the CSS isolation in there. Smab UK says, isn't that just shared? UI if only CSS learn lessons from XML namespace support. The solution doesn't. The solution doesn't use solution name to create. Okay, so Blazor Power is not part of my namespace. So let's see here. This is going to be shared UI is going to be. All right. Thank you for that catch there, Smab UK. So the namespace should be shared UI here. All right. So um, this should be good. We still can't run yet. And I'll explain a little bit more about what I meant by leaving that line in after we run the application. You'll actually be able to see this. Let's double check imports. I got that one already. The next thing we need to do is, well, actually, let's go ahead and run this and you'll see that it doesn't work. And I'll explain why it doesn't work. Shared UIDL could not be found. Okay, so I got a little bit of false negative there. It does run, but it looks a little strange. This may actually be something that's cached. So let's go ahead and make sure that we're not caching something. All right, so I'm really surprised it's working to this extent because it shouldn't. Let me try doing a little bit of a clean solution here. Actually shouldn't be getting anything yet, so I'm a little surprised. It's like one of those, oh, my code's working, but it shouldn't be working situations. Let's go ahead and do a quick run with debugging on. Oh, my Blazor app shared UI. Thank you. Okay. So this did indeed fail as it should. All right. There we go. Yeah, we've got a lot of things that are failing here, and they should be failing. We're still not set up properly. And then Smap's pointing out, I do have the namespace wrong here still. It is indeed my Blazor. Actually, I didn't put that namespace on the Blazor app. Let's see here. Dependencies, projects. It's just shared UI. I should have named it probably my Blazor app shared or something, but I didn't. So we'll just leave it as is for now. All right. So I need to direct the Blazor WebAssembly app to pull the shared pull the pages and shared components from our shared UI library. And I haven't done that yet. To get our Blazor app, let's see, I've still got something that's not happy here. Blazor app client, we're good there. Sometimes these import statements will get you really out of whack. I definitely have an issue here. You'll see that the route data default layout is pointing to a type of main layout. My main layout is elsewhere now. So this is where our shared UI is going to come in handy. So let's go ahead and say using shared UI. And let's see if that clears up our type of main layout. So it's currently not building. I'm not asking it to build the client. I'm asking it to just build clean shared UI and rebuild the shared UI. 3 errors. Yeah, I get that main layout can't be found. I'm not trying to build. I just want to make sure that shared is building and it's being stubborn and trying to build the whole solution anyway. But yeah, it's not going to find main layout yet because main layout is in shared UI dot shared. So that finally got that to quit being annoying. And then what we want to do is say additional assemblies. And this is going to tell the app to look for that shared UI and get any routes from that additional assemblies. So we don't need the @ symbol here. We need to say a new array of assemblies. We'll see type of main layout dot assembly. I just reused main layout here. It just needs to point to literally any page or component inside of this project, and then point to the assembly property of any of those components, and it will be able to navigate that assembly and find all of the route data in it. So any component in the shared UI should be enough to make that happen. The main layout is probably a pretty good one because even if we start, changing parts of this project, we'll probably be keeping the main layout. What you don't want to do is put it on something that might get deleted. You wouldn't want to aim at survey prompt because that's part of like the hello world stuff. We might delete that and then that's going to break our code later. Just put on something that's going to probably make the transition into a production app. So this should be good. We should be able to run the app properly now. So let's see if this compiles out, and it doesn't. So let's see what we've got going on here. Unable to start program, server exe cannot find the specified file. Why is our server not building? So server, we didn't really change anything. It's saying shared UI DLL could not be found. So let's give this a shot. I think this might be a false negative here. So hopefully you don't have to do this, but I'm going to open up my folder in File Explorer and remove the bin and object files from all of the projects in here. It looks like the compiler might be keeping around something old, and it's kind of giving it some fits. So let's go ahead and take those out. Just a little troubleshooting step here, and we'll do a rebuild solution and see. Now it's still not happy with something going on here. I got some of these false negatives yesterday when I was messing around with this, and eventually it cleared itself up. So trying to build out the Maui app right now. While it's doing that, let's just double check here. Under imports, make sure that, again, if you have something in imports, it will throw this off pretty badly. We have client. If there's anything referencing that the components that used to be in the project, it will break it. And sometimes the errors just don't make a whole lot of sense. So this time it says 2 succeeded. Let's try building. Metadata file, shared DLL could not be found. So there's something in here probably that has, there we go. That's what the problem is. So fetch data needs some work yet. It's using HTTP client for one, and it still has a using statement on the Blazor app share data. We have a missing dependency in here. So we want to add a project reference to the shared logic part of the application. So my Blazor app shared, we'll go ahead and add that, and this will resolve. HTTP client. Let's try building shared again. Yeah, HTTP client. We're missing a using statement again here. Let's see if control period will bring it in. We're gonna be getting rid of this in a moment, but I just want to make sure that we can get our app running, and then we can go ahead and modify some things as we go. So there we go. We have all parts of the application compiling now. So we should be able to run it again. And we're still getting some errors here. We can go ahead and check into what that is. But we're getting close. So let's see what error we have. This says, first of all, it says the fave icon is missing. That's understandable. The path changed, and we didn't fix that yet. Let's see. On handled exception, failed to set attribute on click. This one, I'm not sure what exactly is happening in that instance. So something with a component is failing here, and I don't know exactly what the issue is. Looks like there's some sort of script missing, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Let's check our www root folder again. This is all good. This looks fine. Let's check counter component. This one is okay. Don't recall having to change anything in these. So I'm wondering what it's trying to do. Let's try running with debugging enabled. I thought I was running with debugging enabled before, and I'm not hitting any kind of breakpoint on this. So we will figure this out. Failed to execute set attribute on element. On click is not a valid attribute name. That's a very odd error to be getting. Something to do with, let's see, be index HTML. So we're only on the index page. We're missing. Let's see if this does a trick. We'll put this in our imports.razor. Oh, maybe. Sorry, let's try taking our imports.razor and dropping that in. I may have not, or I may have forgotten that. There we go. So I think this is actually what we need here. So we'll take out any using statements that are giving us issues. And then let's try running this one more time. So there's probably some using statements that the components needed at the global level that we weren't getting. There we go. So now we're there. We've got our UI code separated from the WebAssembly project. So, so missed a step there. Make sure you drag or copy your imports.razor in. Some things will not apply to a Razor class library. You'll see those underscored in red. Just go ahead and take those out. Here's what you should be leaving. We may actually come back and remove the HTTP stuff or anything else that we're not using in here. You want to keep in for sure these guys. So this is for any forms that you might build. This is for the routing that takes place in the components. And then these are the basic framework itself, the component framework itself, virtualization for components, and then, of course, the JavaScript interop. These are optional. We'll talk about why next. Visual Studio should have a built-in project template to do this. I do agree with that, Timebender 360. It's always a good idea to move the logic before the UI. I don't really have too much logic to move over. The one piece that we're going to focus on next, though, is logic related, but it's inside of a component. So right now we have fetch data directly using HTTP client. I would not suggest doing this for a shared component. And instead, what we're going to do is we are going to add an interface. I'm going to throw it in the page level here. Let's go ahead and do, I'm going to do a weather data folder inside here. And I'm just going to move my fetch data in here. This is optional if you want to organize this way or not. And then I'm going to add a new class. I actually want an interface here. So I'm going to add an interface here and just say weather forecast Forecast. You may want to put your services or your interfaces in a project uh, where you feel like it belongs. I'm just going to put it in with the component that's going to use the implementation of it, just for just ease of access here. And this fetch data component here is going to use this weather forecast service. It's the only thing I have. I'm just looping it all into one feature here for now. And instead of HTTP client, what I want to do is inject an weather forecast service, and we will inject that as weather service. And then I'm going to come down to the bottom here, and where I have HTTP get from JSON async, I am going to use a service. We haven't really built out what that service is yet. Let's do a close all but this, and then we'll put this in a side-by-side tab here, because we're going to do a little bit of coding against these two views. I want to get the weather forecasts from something else. So this is going to be a task of weather forecast. And it's going to be a nullable array, and we're going to call it get weather forecast. And we need a using statement here. So just control period brings up the using statement. And I'm just going to do the good old sort and remove. So we've got access to our shared logic. That shared logic is going to give us our weather forecast. We have an iWeather forecast service that's used by this component. And it has a get weather forecast method on it that's going to get us back a nullable task of weather forecast. So now we can come down to this line and update it. I want to keep that commented out for a minute because we are going to need that. I want to say weather service dot get weather forecast. And that should satisfy this here. We need to await that. If you want to be very explicit about this too, we could say async, because it's going to get the weather forecast async. So make sure we update that here. So now we have our interface to get the data. We need to create a concrete implementation of this. And since we're going to be sharing this component across two different types of applications, I'm going to go ahead and split this into two different service implementations, because on the server, or sorry, on the WebAssembly app, we might have one method of getting the data and parsing through it, maybe caching it, etc. And on the Maui side of it, we have different resources available. Maybe we want to check something on disk first. Maybe we want to store some temporary cache on disk, that sort of thing. I'm not going to go through all of that, but I do want to separate it into two different implementations just to show you how that would be done. So first thing is on our client app, I'm going to go ahead and add a folder in here called services. And in this folder, I'm going to add a new class of weather forecast service.cs. And this is going to implement the iWeather forecast service, and we'll bring in using statement there. Notice it brought in shared UI pages weather data. That's the weather forecast service that we need. And then we will implement that here. So we're going to get back a task of weather forecast. And remember, I said we're going to need this code. again, and I didn't mean to make 3 of these. I'm going to do 2 side-by-side windows. That code I commented out is going to come in really handy because we need that in our service. So we'll come over to our service and return that. And we don't have HTTP in this yet. So we need to inject that. So we'll say constructor, CTOR double tab. That's going to give us our constructor. If we come up here and say HTTP client as HTTP, and then hit control period, we can say create and assign a field. And that'll give us our dependency injection for HTTP client. It's still red squiggles here. If we hit control period one more time, you'll see using .NET http.json. That'll bring in the final using statement. And that should be good. Let's see what the error is here. Returns value. We don't think we need to await this for one. That's what it is. So since this is a task, we don't need to await here. If we wanted to make this a public async task, then we could await it, but we can just return it without that keyword. This got added by mistake. If we really want to tidy things up and you want to modernize your code, you can come in here, right click again, or click on the little tool and say use expression body for all of these. It's going to one line all of your code for you. There we go. That's a little bit of a preference thing. So depending on if you like Lambda expressions or complete statements, you might want to swap those out. So now we have our service implementation. Next thing we need to do is register that service implementation. So I'm going to go into program CS here, and we'll say builder dot services dot add scoped. And we want to resolve an weather forecast service, control period, namespace, as a weather forecast service. The autocomplete likes to throw the I in front of it again. Control period. Typer name. Yeah, I know. I need a using statement if control period would stop. There we go. Visual Studio is a little behind there. I think I'm working ahead of Rosalind or something. It's not happy with me. Go ahead and save that. It finally caught up, and we have our weather forecast service. Let's just make sure that it didn't create another one. Okay, there we go. So we are pointing to the correct one, and we should be able to rerun the app, and it should work fine. So we've separated the service implementation now. And we should be able to go to weather forecast, and it should work fine. So that's good. We're good to go on that. So we haven't really done anything with Maui yet, right? So we need to do the same process on the Maui app. So I'm going to go back to my Solution Explorer, and let's go ahead and focus in on the Maui app. So I'm actually going to go ahead and scope to this for a minute, just so we can see this a little more clearly. So what did we do last time? We got rid of pages. We got rid of shared. We're going to get rid of most of the stuff in www root. We might need to update our imports file. We need to update some other things as well. Let's start with deleting stuff. We need to get rid of data and pages and shared, because those are going to come from our component library. www root, we need to get rid of the CSS file, the favicon. That's all in the shared library as well. We need to come in here, and once again, our style sheets. I find it interesting that in this template, the rel statement is transposed with the other one. So just for consistency's sake, I'm going to move that to the end. And it's not like a attention to detail thing. It is a readability issue because I have all my href here. And if I'm changing multiple lines to make them the same, like these two, I like to keep them where I can read them at the same time or even make changes at the same time. It's going to be underscore content slash shared UI slash. So fix those two. Again, I'm going to leave that one. I'll explain that one again. Don't let me forget to talk about how CSS isolation magic works and why we don't want to remove this line, even though there's no components in the project. So that is essentially migrated now. So we can save that and close it. Data folder, we're not going to use data. We're going to delete that folder because this is now coming from our shared logic library. And then we're going to have some stuff break. So if we look under here, we want to get rid of this using statement because that code is gone. We want to look under our imports because this is gone. And let's see, is there anywhere else? Maui app. Why is this one causing an error still? Share does not, I deleted it. You can see the compiler is still running behind for some reason. So I'm going to get some false negatives as we do this. I want to go in here and say dependencies again, add project reference, and I want the shared libraries. I've got two of them here. One of them slightly misnamed, but we talked about that. It should be my Blazor app shared UI and shared. We'll go ahead and add those. So now we have reference to the shared UI. So we can come into main.razor. Remember seeing this before. You probably already know what to do here, I hope. So the default layout is no longer inside of our Maui app. It is inside of our shared UI. If I hit control period here, I can bring in a using statement and that should light up. I can also take out this statement here and come up here and say additional. Come on. The compiler's really chugging along here. I'm way ahead of it, so it's not giving me too much IntelliSense. But I should be able to come in and say type of main layout, and then reference the assembly property of it, and curly brace there. So we're newing up an array of assembly, and we're getting the main layout from shared UI, getting the assembly property off of it. That is going to give us all of the routes. So I'll give a little extra explanation of what's happening here. Additional assemblies is telling the Maui app as well as our Blazor WebAssembly app to go into shared, find the main layout, and then go through the this library here. We're getting the whole assembly. Go through that assembly and then find any routes that are in here. And in here we have fetch data, counter, and the root index page. So that's what that line of code does. It says, go get these routes. Go find components with routes. Give me that route data so I can route the application. So there's our router getting its route data. So now the Maui app knows where to find the route data from shared UI. So now it has access to all the pages and components. Program CS. The next thing we need to do here is we need to implement a service for the fetch data component. I'm going to go new folder again, services, and add a new class here. And this time I am going to call this slightly different just for demonstration purposes. Visual Studio, chugging along today. Let's try, is there something up in the background working here? PC's got plenty of power. It's hardly using any CPU. It's the fan's not even on. But for some reason, Visual Studio just taking a dive. Part of live shows, I suppose. So I'm going to call this one Weather Forecast Maui, just for the sake of making sure we understand this is a different implementation. I still am going to use HTTP client here, though. That's just because I don't have any other way to get this data at the moment. I don't have any good examples of kind of changing out the implementation just on the fly. So I'm just going to call this one Forecast Service Maui, just so we can differentiate the two. But they're both going to use HTTP client. Now, HTTP client, we do have access to, as well as system.net JSON, but the let's go into program CS. We need to copy this line from our WebAssembly app because we don't have the HTTP client in. This is an old line, by the way, that's lighting up here. This add singleton of this came from the old code. What we actually want is an weather forecast service that gets our weather Maui and Visual Studio not impressing me today. Bringing in some namespaces very slowly here. Control period on this one. Add the service from our, so this is coming from our component library, the interface. The implementation is coming from the Maui app. There we go. So we've wired that up, but our weather forecast service implementation uses HTTP client. We don't have one in a Maui app. We need to go ahead and add that. There's a little bit of a catch here as well. So when we resolve a new HTTP client, it's going to look for a base address. In the case of a WebAssembly app, it has a host environment base address. We do not have that in a Maui app. So we're just going to hard code this one because this is essentially going to be on web, desktop, and mobile. It needs to be able to find the server to get JSON data from the server. The server is running at, I can't remember. So we're going to go ahead and do a start a new instance and get the address from it. I could look in the config files as well, but we'll see here that it's going to spin up on localhost 7.11.7. Go ahead and pop that in there. That's the same server that's running the data for the web app as well. So now we've got our HTTP client looking at our APIs on localhost. It has an iWeather forecast service that is using the weather forecast service Maui version, even though the code is the same for this example. And we do have some errors in there. There we go. Constructor was misnamed. Copy paste errors are fun. What we need, or what we could do rather, is we could have some custom stuff in here now that deals with platform specifics. We could have things in this one as well that deal with WebAssembly specifics. So we have two different implementations of the service, and we can control those based on the context they're running in. You could even further change out those implementations based on platform. I won't get into all the details on it, but you can essentially go into the platforms themselves and you can register other services and things and code paths inside of these file folders, and they will override behaviors depending on their platform. So now we should be able to come in. I believe we've got everything migrated for Maui. So our Maui app is um, our Maui app is getting shared logic from our shared library, getting UI from our shared UI library, and let's see if we can build the complete solution now. Let's see if we get any errors. So everything's looking pretty good so far. All the builds are taking place. And done building Project Maui. Looks like we're going to be good to go. We should be able to run all the things now. SMAB UK says if networks tied up with streaming, some of the IntelliSense code pilot routines use networks to look things up. If the stream is going well, I don't know if that little bit of data would cause an issue, but that could be a thing. That could be the problem. Have I turned off Roslyn Analyzer except for the current doc? No, I haven't. I probably need to look up how to do that because I haven't seen it get slow like this before. All right, so looks like we're good to go. First thing I need to do is come in and right click on my server app. And I'm going to say start a new instance. I'm going to go ahead and do it without debugging. It looks like we already have one up there. It should supersede it. There is the Blazor app running. There's Blazor app. This is the WebAssembly app. And then I should be able to come over here and say start new instance. Go ahead and do it without debugging here as well. That is our Maui app. Let's see if our Maui app is good to go. There we are. So we've got desktop version, web application version, both running using the same shared UI and the same shared logic, their own service implementations, which essentially get you back the same data in the same way, but we could modify those services based on where they're running now. And of course, our counter. So this is one code base running them all. And if you look, you can tell my Blazor app, they're both running that same code base. Fuel Snabble says, looks like Maui should just be the web view. And essentially that's what we're doing in a Blazor Hybrid app. Is Maui is there for logical reasons. So Maui is going to give us access to the platform. So if we want to do on our Windows desktop app something with file IO, or I want to access some USB devices off of the desktop here. I want to access a gyroscope on a mobile phone, those type of things. I could essentially do those in Web 2, but they would be using browser APIs. I can do those things in Maui using the platform APIs. So I get raw access to the platform on that. I can even like push toast notifications into here, that sort of thing. But these are using the um, same UI logic. So this is nice. Now, what I want to do next is just clarify that CSS isolation thing one more time because that caught me off guard before. So if I go in here and hit inspect and I go into sources, I have a generated CSS file the compiler made. My Blazor app client.css styles.css. Look what it added. It added an import statement. It says import content shared UI bundle scp.css. So that is a little bit of CSS isolation magic that doesn't work if you remove that line from your index HTML file. So what this is doing is if there's any components in my WebAssembly app that use CSS isolation, they will go in here. I don't have any components in here. I have a dependency that looks at shared UI though, and the CSS isolation process will go, well, you have a shared UI library that has CSS isolation going on. I'm going to take the CSS from that and add it to an import statement inside of this file. If you don't have this href here, it cannot render it. So it'll add it, but you don't have it linked on your page, therefore it doesn't get displayed. So if you remove this, which we can do, and save that, let's see if it hot reloads back. You'll notice the styles just get broken. I lost navigation is in here, it's just hidden. But if you look, that file's gone now. We haven't linked to it. So even though we have a dependency on that project and there's CSS in it, the style sheet doesn't get added. So we want to keep that file there during our migration. Yeah, so that, let's get the hall mirrors away here. So now we can deploy web, desktop, and mobile from one single code base. Even though it's multiple solutions, it's still all .NET. It's still in the same, or sorry, projects. It's still in the same solution. They're all sharing from one pot of components. Pretty cool stuff. I like it. Fuel Snubble says, or be able to deploy web, desktop, mobile without the need to run a server alongside our Blazor server application. You could do that. The only reason I need the server in this instance is because I have data coming from it. If you don't have a need for that data to come from a server, then you can totally skip the part where I'm running a server here. The app will run without that server, just the fetch data page will not work without that server. So if I shut the server down, just to show folks that might be skeptical that I know that isn't what you were saying, but there might be folks that are thinking that Maui is relying on the server to render HTML or something like that. I can run my Maui app without the server running. The only thing it won't do is get data. And there's a process running somewhere that's not letting me run a new instance. So where are you? Process. I have a process stuck somewhere. Maybe if I run it with debugging, it'll kick that process. There we go. That ended up shutting the app down. So you can see the app runs perfectly fine as long as I don't click on fetch data. If I do click fetch data, then boom, it's going to say loading Eventually, I think I'll get the yellow bar. Yep, there it goes because it timed out. So it's looking for the data from the server there. Um, if they're oh my face is still here. Sorry about that. I don't want to see my face either. Let's see here. So let's try that again. Let's run the app again. Uh, Server is not running. We'll start a new instance here. Starting a new instance of the Maui app. And it did it again. It takes a minute, I guess, for that Maui app to spin down with the development environment going. So let's try a new instance again. There it goes. So again, the server is not serving HTML. The server has no reason to run for this application other than to load the fetch data page. So I can count, I can be home, I can do anything else in here. As soon as I click on fetch data, it's going to try to load data from the server, which isn't running. And now it's going to error out. I can hit F12, by the way, and I can come into the console and we can see that it is trying um, to make a connection and it was refused. It says it's refused because there's nothing on localhost 7.11.7 to respond back. So it's just going to error out. And that's if I had an alternate path for that service to load data locally, I mean, that could be an option. We could say if the server doesn't respond, load some cache data that's saved in a JSON file on disk. And I could cache something when you hit this page, initially. And it could come up and say, this is weather data from such and such a date, server's offline, but here's what I've got. So that's where we could get kind of clever with the Maui app. Love it because I have zero experience with XAML. Same here. I have minimal zero, maybe okay, one. I have one experience out of 100 with XAML, and first project was to do a desktop application. I was able to use Blazor to quickly put together UI and business logic. It's normal. That is so awesome. One line. That is awesome. I really think that speaks to the folks that want to use this. Like that's the reason I love it. Um, XAML, I give a lot of like trash talk to, but it's all joking. Like if it works for you, it works for you. But if you're not doing XAML daily, like you're doing HTML, like you and I are doing, then XAML looks like a big black box of mystery to us. And this lets us build with HTML, CSS, and web standard tech. And we can still build desktop and mobile applications using the things that we already know. And this also gives us like the ability to take our existing WebAssembly app, move it, or give a companion app to the Maui side, and then we've got all the platforms targeted from just that one shared code base. So it's really cool stuff. Make sure you check that out. I'm going to put together a blog post on this. It's in the middle of being written right now. Hopefully the video helps. It'll be up here on Twitch and also be on our YouTube channel. Um, Speaking of Twitch, give me 1 second here. I have a link to share with you all. I'm struggling to manipulate the main window, top bar color styling. In the Blazor app or like the shell UI of the Maui app? Okay, I'm ready to share this now. Oh, in the shell, say I'm targeting Windows. Yeah, I know that takes place in XAML somewhere in I just can't remember where. If it's in um there's main page.xaml, which has some background color stuff. And then there's app.xaml. And I think it's an app.xaml you have to attach styles to. Try app.xaml. Um, there may be some ways to change colors in app.xaml. So let me share my screen real quick. So we won't get into it, but I just kind of like off the top of my head, I'm in app.xaml on the Maui app, and if you look under application, there's a resource dictionary that has colors, and you can see we've got the .NET color here. That's when your app loads, especially on mobile. You see this. There's like a purple page that loads. Um, you may be able to control the window colors in some settings here. You might need to set some property settings in here. But again, I'm not a XAML expert, just like you. But I think this is one place. And then there's also main page. This is page specific, but there's, app.xaml is application specific. So there's some properties in here under application and under resources as well. There might be something that you can set to modify the shell colors. So take a look there. And then while I have you all, if you're new to Blazor and you want to learn more about Blazor, I will be streaming from the Manning Twitch channel next week on Wednesday. So next week, Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, I'm going to talk about Secrets of a Blazor Component Artisan, which is a talk that goes through just the basic building blocks of components, how to use properties and parameters and cascading parameters, event callbacks, and that type of thing. And then I have a code to save 40% off on Manning for my live project that is currently it's not listed yet. So I think this is a placeholder here. But I have a live project that will walk you through building Blazor WebAssembly applications. So you can go on the live project. It's structured in a way that you learn how to build Blazor apps. You learn how to build components, do CRUD operations, utilize CSS isolation, and learn how to do more complex state management and communication between pages and components and things. And then finally, you'll learn how to do authentication in Blazor and implement that in your project. It's all done in a way that teaches you through challenges. So you're given some things step by step with some instruction on what to do. And then you're also left to go read some books and some blog posts and things like that to try to fill in some of the blanks where you're not given every single step. So you're not following like a tutorial exactly. You're more like on the job training style of learning how to build Blazor applications. And that's going to be released on Manning here very shortly. Hopefully, we get that up by the time we air the show. It's going through its final, what do you call it, editorial feedback loop right now. So it should be up soon. So check that out at Manning's Twitch channel. And that's twitch.tv/Manning. Or you can come to this link here. And I'll drop that into chat as well. So super happy that that is finally coming around. I've been working on that for several months now. So the Blazor Live project, building a Blazor web application, should be up soon. Thank you all. We'll see you next week on the Manning channel. And have a good afternoon. Take care.